Welcome to your first tutorial video. For this tutorial, we're just going to concentrate on getting you started on the coding question for task 2. Now, this is not a huge program. It's not meant to be anything super complex. It's just a small one to get your legs back in the game for writing a basic Java program. What I'm going to do for this video is concentrate on how I would start this coding project of understand the requirements and setting up the layup of my code before I start filling in the code. Where here I generally like to set up the shell of the classes that I want and the objects that I'm going to be using, and then start breaking down the functionality into different methods. Now, like every program, we need a good main to start. So I like to not keep everything for running the main program just in that main function. I would create one class independently, put the main in there, then create a separate class that represents the entire execution of the system. It's just my personal style. So we'll start with book list, add our main, finish. So nothing too special here. Next, I create a class that will represent the overall system itself. So and what I like to have in this program, just to start everything off, is a basic run function. Public. And the point of this is this represents where the whole execution and flow of the program will happen. So if we go back to our main, then our main just becomes instantiating an instance of that object, of that class, and then calling the run function. I mainly do this just so it allows me to break up the functionality, and then also if I have everything broken down to methods, easier testing if I want to manually test different things. Okay, so that's a general way to start everything, and we know, well, system, we need the start point, we need to actually have the run. Next thing is to start building everything else we need based upon the actual requirements itself. So as I read through the assignment, I look for the requirements and think, okay, where's the main flow of the program? What's the first thing that should happen, the next thing, and so forth from there. And I want to start building and calling the functions as if I've already made them here in the run, and then once I've got that set up, then I can generate those functions and have them at least blank and ready to go, and then start filling in each step that I need to. So this program itself is basically a reading list or book list. It's nothing really special, just has one basic list, keeps book objects that have some basic information in it. It presents a menu which then allows the user to add, remove, and list out the books currently in the system, and has some basic error checking. It also allows for persistence of information so that when the program starts up, it will just automatically load whatever books there are in a file. It'll then do work with them, and then before the program shuts down, it writes back those books back to the exact same file so that on the next startup, the information will always be there. So that's your short summary. Now, one thing to keep in this is that it'll always be in a file called readinglistdb.txt. So that's a constant. So that is a good candidate right now to make your constant as we go. So your usual constant of public static const. Oops. Why is it complaining? Oh, yeah, that's C++. Final. Sorry, const was C++, mixing myself up here. Final is what you have in Java, and then int. I like to give it a nice name and keep everything as capitals just to practice for style for doing constants. And then here we go, we got our file name that we can use later on. Okay. Now, includes a text-based menu, allows the user to add and remove books, and prints out all books currently in the system. Now, for the text-based menu, you do not need to build this yourself. You're supposed to use the provided code. So it'll be using user interaction class. There's actually a menu class that will handle running a menu for you and getting the proper choice from a user and returning it back to you. Before the end of this video, I'll show you how to set that up and how it's really easy to actually work with. Next, we know that, okay, here's information, the basic information you expect to have about a book. So it has to have a title, author's name, some basic error checking that has to be done at some point in time within the actual program. So this is an awesome candidate for a class that you should create. And since if you're using any IDE, this should be a really easy thing to actually set up. Oop. Recording videos at night is not good for me early at night because I seem to think a string is an int. So no, public, static, final, double final name, reading list. And now we're going to go off and make our actual book class. So first get candidate, make a new class, call book. Okay. Create your instance variables that should be private. I'll go slower this time. That we know we have to have the title and we have to have the author's name. Both of those seem like good candidates for strings for me. Private string. Title. Private string author. Next from here we have to decide upon, so we've got our state of the object, keeping it all private for instance variables. We then want to start adding what methods we need for this. So we know so far that, okay, well, we need to add information into here. And we're going to be doing it when we load from a file. So this is a great candidate to have a constructor where we pass in all that information. So we can use Eclipse to generate it for us quickly using the fields, include both, and generate. Got your constructor. The super thing here you can leave in. It's not required because again we're not inheriting from anything other than by default the object class. So even though it's auto-generated, we don't really need it, so I just remove it for now. We have everything being copied over for the string. We got that constructor done. Now we can generate some getters and setters if we actually need to at this time. But I'm going to hold off because you only want to open up access to the instance variables when it's required for an object. So you don't always need to have getters and setters unless it's required to always be setting and changing this. So I'm going to leave the class this way for right now. And as we look through the rest of the requirements, we'll come back and actually take a look, okay, well, what other things do we need to add into this class at this time? For right now, based upon what we know here, we've covered that has authors' titles. We know we need to deal with some of this error checking that we can add at some point in time. We have now, knowing that we have to have persistence, that at the start of the program, all information must be loaded from a file. So this is the very first thing. So to deal with this, I would go back to the book list program. We know that the run method we're setting up so far is to be the beginning point for a program. So the first thing that should happen is loading all the data. So what I'm doing here is we don't have this method yet, but I'm just trying to give it a good name, and I can think, okay, does it need to return anything? Well, no, we're going to have to store the books into the book system right here. Does it need anything to be passed in? Well, no, it's just going to be using this db file name constant that we use for the file that it needs to open. The only thing that comes to mind here with me next is, well, for this one to do its work, it's going to need somewhere to store all those books. We don't have to pass it in since we're in this class and it all relates to one entity of being the system. So this is a good candidate for an instance variable for this class. So adding in right now a basic array list of our books we want to store. Oops. Boom. So we'll set up our array list. This will be the list that the entire system will access to add, remove, and store books in the system. We know that load all books will then be the one that'll put it into this list here. So before we go to make any stub blank things for this function, I'm just going to continue on and add, okay, well, it's the rest of the flow of the program. Keep adding in our fake functions for now, and then make the independent stubs. So you know at the start of the program, all information must be loaded from a file. It's going to come from readinglist.txt. If the file does not exist, the program should continue to work, and the initial book list should be blank. So right now we know we have a blank list to start with. We know that if there's no file there, we can either do checks using other classes in Java, or we need to deal with exception handling so that when we open a file, if it jumps down to an actual error catch statement, we can get the proper flow of the actual program to deal with that. After that, before the program shuts down, all information should be saved back to the original file we did it from. So, well, that should be perfect. At the bottom of our run function, we should have save all books function, which will take whatever's in the book lists, open up db file, and then write the information out to that. So first thing, last thing. Proper exception handling needs to be done, so this is generally for some stuff for writing out files, more when loading information coming in, and maybe some other errors checking. The file format is given to you here, where you just need to go through reading line by line for all of this, and there has been some example code for reading from files, so most likely next tutorial, depending on what time we have here, we'll go through that, or you can take a step ahead. A hint I'm giving is as you read in strings, you can use the split function to break it apart and get the information you need properly from here. And you have some error checking that you must deal with. But there's some basic ones. We'll assume that no titles will have the hash character, so we're not having any weird parsing issues to deal with. The next from here is you need to set up the actual text menu. So this is presented after all information has been loaded from the file at the start of the program, but would be before saving at the end. We present the menu with these choices of the add, remove, list, and then quit. And then we keep executing all of that until the user actually quits from the program. So the next thing from here, for doing simple main, just keeping this readable and just breaking down everything here, I would just make a random function here called run menu. Yeah, if I can spell menu properly. Menu, and so this will load from the books, run menu will run until the menu shuts down, and then saved books is automatically called. And we can see from here, basic program. Well, this so far summarizes in the run method the exact flow of our entire program. So from here, I believe so far that I've captured the main functionality, and now I can start subdividing things. So I'm going to take what we did for as if these were our method calls and actually make the blank method signatures. I'm just making these private for right now because there's no reason for anything else yet in our program we're designed to do that. We just have the run method, and then these are kept internally. And before I go any further, I should start at least adding in some of my documentation so I don't forget. I'm requiring for you guys to use some JavaDoc above each of your functions. If you've never seen JavaDoc before, it is the commenting where it has the 2 stars here at the top, and then you see these @ signs in here. This is special commenting formatting for a program called JavaDoc that can run over your program and generate an actual web page based upon your code. Now, all of you have seen the output for JavaDoc if you've ever gone to the Java API websites and seen the libraries. That's exactly what they come out looking like. And so for all of these, I want you to start having your file headers and following the general structure that you see here. And so you can see examples like this one here where there is a method. Right here, say method with no parameters like most of the ones we have here, and has no return. And we can just start pasting that in place. So forth. Okay, we've got everything set up. We can check why it's complaining about errors. Oop, extra bracket. Make sure that everything's good to go. So we got our main program going. We now know we need to deal with loading the files, but that'll be a future tutorial, or you want to work ahead of how to read stuff from files. We need to save back to files, which will be a similar tutorial, and now we need to set up the actual menu. Now, setting up the menu here, you'd expect you'd have a loop, some output statements, reading in, and some kind of validation, but I want you guys to use some example code that I've provided. So in the directory that comes with it, you will see examples for reading from and writing to files. You see example file of your data, but you also have code you need to add to your program. And the idea is that this is code that's broken up into packages, and there's some examples, but all of our main menu right now is here just in this user communication package. So to add that in properly, you can use whatever your IDE, but for Eclipse, I can just drag it and drop it over top of the default package. Make sure that it says to actually copy everything. And then make sure that there's no errors. And you can see we have 3 classes in here, one called user interaction. The point of this class is it's kind of a wrapper around system.out and kind of like the scanner class, that your input and output is dealt with for you all in one class. So you guys need to use this, but it makes the scanner. It has some basic print methods like you'd expect to see. It has some debugging ones, but then it has a little bit more advanced functions for just, hey, asking the user for an input. So you give it a message, and then it prints the message and waits for the user to enter an int, or it waits for them to enter an integer greater than a certain value, and confirmation message. So it's a lot of useful things that you don't have to keep repeating other code and common tasks, and just made generic down to what method you need to pass in. Now, the menu class you see here is one that just allows you to make a text-based menu, but you can add and remove menu items from it that are represented by these menu menu options here. So it just handles everything else, that it'll print it out, it'll validate that they give the proper choice back, and once they finally do, it gives it back to whoever is the main calling program, which then can handle interpreting what's going on. So the code may look weird. I don't expect everyone here to understand everything that's happening. I suggest you take a look through, but the idea is just to give you experience more of getting used to working with someone else's code. Now, what is provided with this is 2 example files that, again, you should add to your program, but once you're done using them, remove them. This is something that I may take marks off because there's no reason to have unnecessary code in your program if you don't really need it to be here. So these 2 ones we'll put into the default package here again and copy over, and they are just examples for how to use the user interaction class. So how do you actually even make the object since it's made in a different way, and then how do you work with it and use it to do a few different things like confirmations or no confirmations. You then also have then the example for how you set up a menu. The nice thing with this is you set a menu once as an object, and then you can use it in multiple places. So the idea that we have our interaction, we have our menu from right here, and then you want to make a menu with choices, then all you do is you call the add menu option on your menu object. You give it what character they have to type in to select it, and then what message should be displayed. And then after this, you can then do things like getting their choice. So get user choice, and this function here will print out the method, wait for the user to enter a valid choice, and then it'll return back that choice to you here, which is a menu option object, which then you can check to see, okay, which one of these characters was set up for you. So you can see an example here where I just printed out. So the choice.get option will return back to you this character or string that you put in here, and so then you can set up switch statements or if-else ladders to compare what you're doing. So what I'm going to do now is I'll help you get started on setting up that actual menu in the book list system. So we need to first create these objects here in this same way. So we can even just copy these first 2 lines you see here, go back to our book list system. Now here we have the choice that we could make it instance variables that's accessible in multiple spots for the programs, or we could make it local. What I'm going to decide to do at this time is, well, think, okay, well, load all books, save all books. It doesn't need anything to do with the menu object. There's no other methods in here that need to use the menu object. So I think instead of making an instance variable, it would be better to keep this local. So it's just with the run menu and keeping all the run menu stuff contained, just for this program since this is the one spot. So we make user interaction, we make menu from right here. Now it should have automatically imported up here the user communication, which is the package we put in. A lot of times Eclipse and other IDEs will individually import each one. I like to clean this up and take it out so that I can just star all, bring everything in, since I'm not concerned about any unwanted classes being included, but we can remove an unnecessary import statement here at the top. Boom. So down here in the menu, we've got everything else. I want to pick a better menu here, which I'll just call whatever, book sys menu. Okay. Next thing after that, we need to, before running and doing anything with the actual menu itself, we need to add in all the choices that we want. So that's where we can use our add menu option. And there's 2 ones right here, but this is the main one right here that you want to use. That just allows you to put in a name. And Eclipse tried to autofill it with stuff, and it was trying to be helpful, but was not very helpful in this case. So in this case, I'm just going to make this blank. We can bring up the requirements document once again and just look at the choices we have to do. So add, remove, list, and quit. So we're going to need 4 of these. And I did not copy all of that. Got that right. I'm just going to shrink this over so we can see both sides here easily and add in each choice. And so generally when you put these in here, it'll also be the same order they'll appear in the menu when it's printed. So add book. Right here, R for remove book. L for list all books. And Q for exit the program. So I've set that up. Now we set that up once, and it means that all these menu options will be in this object and we don't need to do it again. So after this we can start doing the rest of our entire program. So it's got to run the entire menu until they actually select quit. So that's right here for the Q. And this is a good candidate then I would pick using a do while, because we've got to go in and actually at least print the menu once. And then we've got to exit out. I won't fill in the conditional yet. We'll still just keep doing everything else. Okay. So back to our menu here, we can then see that we are going to need one of these objects right here, at least an instance variable, just as something like a temporary variable to hold what choice comes back with the menu. And then we have this right here. So we get our choice, and here book system menu, get a choice. So I said again is that calling from the menu object, getting the get user choice will print out the entire menu, get them to enter a valid one, and it'll only return once they give a valid choice out of the ones that we've added to it. And the loop. Then after this we can start doing the rest of our actual work. So here we would then check and start executing what we need to do for choices. And if we want to exit, we just have to see that does choice dot get option, which returns back the, again, from the menu right here, returns back the options that you're seeing there. Compare to So I'm just using this one, so making a longer main, but choice dot get option right here dot compare to ignore case, just so I don't worry if it's upper or lower case at all, and keep going until we don't get a Q, or until we do get a Q. So we know the compare to ignore case, when it equals being the same with what's in there, it will return back 0. So as long as we don't get a 0, stay in the actual loop itself from right here. So far we've got where we'll actually shut down. Now we just need to deal with actually handling executing the specific choice. So what I would do from here next is decide, do we need to break this into another function because there's a lot of choices are checking, and so from here, and really there's only 3 of add, remove, list. So I think we're okay right now just to continue on from here. So from here, I would at least start with something like a switch statement to begin with, since we're just comparing a bunch of list of choices. So getting our actual option, which will just be a string, as long as everything is not case sensitive. I'm just going to set up everything temporarily and then add in code from there. So the add, the remove, and then the list. And you can see how fast this program is coming together and breaking stuff down. Now we still have other functionality like the loading and everything else. But before I stop from right here, I just want to add one more thing in, is that we should start adding in and breaking down the code, because I don't think it would be good to have all of the add, all of the remove, and all the list inside this case statement. This is another case where it would be better to break it down into individual methods. So we can add, make a temporary, what I'd expect from here, so something to do for adding the book. Okay, so headers, again, I don't think anything, but it also makes the code readable. We know what's happening here. And then for each one of these actual methods, we can go down and add them into our program. So I will do that here just below. I'm lazy, I'll copy and paste and just change the name. Make sure everything that's matching up. And at least add in the, oh, we'd leave the headers, you guys can do that. Now from here, so it means I've got my menu set up here. Boom. I've got each one setting up here, so now I can break down, start doing the work for adding a book, removing a book, listing all of the actual books here. And then we know we need to deal with saving. We kind of have everything we need for the program, and we have spots of where we can go to next, which I'll leave for you guys to fill in how to do the rest of this. And I think we'll call it a stop there for right now. So I'm not testing this yet. I'll leave you guys to test everything and set everything up. But I hope this gave you a good starting point to go further and realize that this isn't that bad of anything for coding. You can continue on from there. If you want to get a head start for doing anything for loading or writing from books, again, there is a provided example, and you can look back to how you've done it in the past. And just continue on being awesome people is all that I ask from you. And to look forward to the next lecture.